Chapter 2. The Wilder King Chant. Jasper and Percy, the Arlson twins, were supposed to be repairing the grape arbor near the manor house, but the rhythmic clanging that sounded from underneath the draping scuppernong vines was the ring of broadswords on broadsword, not the ring of hammer on spike. The twins had just turned 15 and were now eligible for service in the Cornwalder army, so all their spare time, and much of their work time too, as it turned out, they spent drilling and practicing, sharpening the skills of swordsmanship and cavalry. In this particular duel, it was Percy's turn to play the foreign invader, a black-armored, black-hearted knight of the hated Pithrin Empire. Jasper, fighting for Cornwall and King Darrow, was getting the better of him. Percy broke and ran. The Python always broke and ran in the Errolson's military exercises, and Jasper ran after him with raised sword. "Fly, Pearson, swine!" called Jasper, "and never set foot on this island again. This is Cornwall, free and true." He picked up a rock and threw it in his brother's direction. "Go tell that to Emperor Meridud." Laughing and running down the cart path, Percy suddenly stopped. Jasper looked to see what had so arrested his brother's attention. A tall, barrel-chested old man was approaching up the cart path with long, rapid strides. Bright white hair erupted from his head in all directions. His long white beard was equally rambunctious. Two goats, a billy, and a nanny trotted behind him. The Errolsons leaned on their swords and watched the visitor as he approached. The old man carried no walking stick. He was dressed in a dusty tan robe, and though it was only May, the hot Cornwall sun had already browned his skin to a deep cinnamon. But the most remarkable thing about the man's appearance was his pale green eyes. Even from 20 strides away, the Errolsons could see that these were not the eyes of a normal man. When the old man fixed his gaze on Jasper and Percy, they weren't quite sure if he saw them or not. He seemed to be looking through them. When he was 5 strides from the Errolson twins, the man stopped so abruptly that the goats ran into the back of his legs. Gazing into or through the Errolson's eyes, the old man spoke. "I am here to find the king." The twins exchanged a look. Was the old bird off his perch? Percy spoke first. "I'm afraid you've overshot it, grandfather. King Darrow's palace is a half-day's march up the river road, the way you came." "I am here to find the king," the old man repeated. "He dwells in the house of Errol." "You've come to the house of Errol," said Jasper. "We are Errol's sons, but no king is here." Percy could never resist a joke. "Perhaps you're looking for the house of Merrill," he teased. "His place is just west of here, but he's only a chicken farmer, so I don't see why the king would be there." The brothers laughed at Percy's joke, but if the old man heard it, he gave no indication. The boy's laughter was cut short when the front door swung open and his father Errol clattered down the steps. They stared in amazement as their father dropped to his knees and kissed the callous hands of the unknown wayfarer. They could make no sense of it. Their father was one of the 24 noblemen of Cornwall, one of King Darrow's closest advisers. Yet he was paying homage to this dusty stranger who, from the looks of things, didn't have the sense God gave a snapping turtle. Errol's eyes were wet with tears as he spoke. "Reverend friend and teacher, you are most welcome to my house." The old man patted Errol's head, but he didn't speak or otherwise move. The nanny goat snuffled at Errol's hair, trying to decide whether to eat it. "Father," Jasper marveled, "do you know this madman?" Percy broke in. "He thinks we've got King Darrow hidden somewhere." Errol rose to his feet and glared at his sons. "You will speak respectfully of this man. He is worthy of your honor. He is Bayard, the truth speaker, Cornwall's greatest prophet." If the twins were amazed before, there were no words for their astonishment now. This man was Bayard, the truth speaker, the great prophet and counselor their father and grandfather had spoken of so often. Had he come to this tramping around the countryside in the company of goats, babbling nonsense? Earl turned back to Bayard. It has been 20 years since you last visited this house. To what do we owe this happy honor? Bayard pierced Errol with those green eyes and said in a low tone, I am here to find the king who dwells in the house of Errol. Errol blushed slightly and cleared his throat. He glanced to his sons. Then he looked down at his hands for a few awkward seconds. What am I thinking? He suddenly said, with a forced smile. The sun is blistering. Please, Bayard, come inside and take some refreshment. Leaving everyone behind, the old man headed up the stairs, leading to the entry hall, taking the steps two at a time. The goats had already mounted the first step when Percy caught them by the horns, one with each hand. Hold on there, Billy. Hold on, Nan. Where do you think you're going? Bayard stopped on the sixth step, but did not turn around. They go where I go. Percy looked to his father. In that case, said Errol with a broadening smile, they are heartily welcome in my house. Shaking his head in wonderment, Percy let go of the goat's horns, and they scrambled up the steps to catch up with their master. Errol spoke to the three baffled servants who had watched the scene through the entry hall window. One scurried to the kitchen, and the other two ran out the front door. Let's retire to the great room, said Errol. What other room is suitable for so great a guest? Jasper and Percy, you will join us. I have sent servants to fetch your brothers. In the great room, Errol placed Bayard in the seat of honor near the huge stone fireplace. The goat sat on the floor on either side of his chair. Errol and his two sons sat in the chairs across from Bayard. The efficient servant arrived immediately with a tray of refreshments and placed it on the hearth beside the old prophet. On the tray were a pitcher of ale for Bayard, a pitcher of water for the goats, 3 drinking bowls, and a plate of cheese. Goat cheese, offered Errol, suddenly embarrassed. Bayard gave no indication that he had heard of him. He poured a bowl of ale and sniffed it. Closing his eyes, he took a sip and nodded approvingly. Then, to the amazement of everyone in the room, he set the ale on the floor in front of the billy goat, who began lapping it eagerly. He poured a second bowl of ale for the nanny. For himself, he poured a bowl of water. He left the cheese untouched. After a painful silence, Errol addressed his sons. Bayard here was a friend of your grandfather's. When they first came to this part of the country, it was nothing but swamp and tanglewood, ruled by panthers, bears, and wolves. Bayard said nothing. He appeared not to be listening. The billy goat lapped up the last of his ale and burped loud and long. Errol soldiered on. Boys, that was a generation of great pioneers. They carved a civilization out of pure wilderness, a place where they wouldn't answer to any tyrant, only to their conscience and to the God who made them free men. The old wayfarer seemed perfectly unaware of anyone else in the room. Jasper and Percy were embarrassed for their father. They had never seen him so thunderstruck, not even in the presence of King Darrow himself. After another awkward pause, Errol continued, I've known Bayard all my life. When I first marched out to battle against the Perthins, I was about your age. It was Bayard here who pronounced the benediction on the troops. Not so much of a flicker of recognition passed across the old man's face. The nanny goat was chewing thoughtfully on a hanging tapestry that had been in Errol's family for generations. But at least she seemed to be listening. Percy cast a sidelong glance out the window, hoping that his brothers would soon arrive from the fields. Brennus, the eldest brother, always seemed to know what to say and to do. But then again, so did father. Yet Bayard the truth speaker was proving to be more than he could handle. Errol was still droning on, and when the people of Cornwall decided they wanted a king, who do you think placed the crown on Darrow's head? There was a brief silence, and Percy realized his father was looking directly at him, expecting an answer. Bayard? Percy's answer sounded unsure, like a question, even though his father had told him this story hundreds of times. The very same, and he remained Darrow's chief adviser until. Here, Errol stopped short. Well, in any case, the point is, you, my sons, are in the presence of Cornwall's greatest man. King Darrow accepted, of course. Jasper and Percy looked closely at the old visitor. One of his goats was tugging at the sleeve of his robe. The other was chewing on his sandal. He certainly didn't look like Cornwall's greatest man, with his white hair and beard shooting off in all directions, and those green eyes staring off into the distance. Their thoughts were interrupted when two more young men entered the room. They were Brennus and Maynard, the eldest two of the Arlon boys, just in front of the hayfield. They had been seething the season's first hay crop, side by side with the hired hands. Still covered with dust and sweat, Brennus and Maynard stood blinking in the dim light of the great room. Errol was about to introduce the new arrival when Bayard rose to his feet. Still gazing well past his audience, he began to chant a verse that all Cornwallers knew. It was the Wilder King chant, an ancient prophecy as old as Cornwall itself. When fear of God has left the land to be replaced by fear of man, when Cornwallers free and true enslave themselves and others too, when mercy and justice disappear, when life is cheap and gold is dear, when freedom's flame has burned to ember, and Cornwallers can't remember what are truths and what are lies, then will the Wilder King arise. To the palace he comes from forests and swamps. Watch for the Wilder King, leading his troops of wild men and brutes. Watch for the Wilder King. He will silence the braggart, ennoble the coward. Watch for the Wilder King. Justice will roll and mercy will toll. Watch for the Wilder King. He will guard his dear lambs with the staff of his hand. Watch for the Wilder King. With a stone he shall quell the panther fell. Watch for the Wilder King. Watch for the Wilder King. Widows and orphans, look to the swamplands, ye misfits, ye outcasts. From the land's wildest places a wild man will come to give the land back to her people. Bayard looked into Errol's eyes. I am here to see the Wilder King of Cornwall. He dwells in the house of Errol. For the first time, Errol felt himself losing patience with the old man. Errol was a great patriot, and his loyalty to the king was unshakable. Speak no more of any king but Darrow. Darrow is king of Cornwall, and he does not dwell here. I have pledged my allegiance to Darrow. I have risked my life for Darrow. It is by Darrow's pleasure that I hold these lands. And any man who raises himself against King Darrow will learn what my sword is made of. Bayard seemed entirely indifferent to Errol's outburst. He paced across the room and stood before Brennus. He studied the eldest Arlon from his head down to his boots and back up again. At 20 years old, Brennus certainly cut the most kingly figure of all the brothers. He was tall and handsome. He carried himself with an air of command. He was accustomed to getting his way. Bayard nodded his head. Your name is Brennus, the eldest son of Errol, by rights the heir to Longleaf. But in your bones you feel that you were born for greater things. Brennus shifted nervously, uncomfortable at having his secret ambitions spoken in front of his family. Bayard continued, Indeed, I see a regal bearing in your face. You are strong of limb, Adria with sword and shield. Men would rejoice to follow such a leader. The old prophet gave Brennus one more look, as if arriving at his final assessment. But you are not the wilder king. Bayard turned next to Maynard, the second brother. In all things, Maynard was second to Brennus, second in age, he was 18, second in stature, second in talents, convinced he would never quite measure up to his elder brother. Maynard had sharpened the skills of cunning. His eyes were permanently narrow from a lifetime of scheming. Bayard began. You are Maynard, Harold's second son. You know the prize does not always go to the one who is first of birth, or first in ability, first in strength, or first in the field. Sometimes the prize, even the prize of a throne, goes to the one who has learned to put himself first, even if birth and talent have not. This you have learned to do, Maynard. Maynard averted his gaze, angry at having been so revealed, but even still, a greedy glint was visible in his eyes. Bayard continued, But you are not the wilder king. Bayard faced the twins. The twins I have met already, Jasper and Percy. Jasper, you are the scholar of the family, only 15 years old, yet you surpass even your father in the lore and history of Cornwall. Every prophecy you have learned by heart, and every date, every battle, every family of note in the kingdom. This is the knowledge that serves a ruler well. A king must know his kingdom. Jasper stood a little taller. A smile of pride played about the corners of his mouth. And yet, you are not the wilder king. Bayard turned to Jasper's twin brother. That leaves only Percy, does it not? Percy could not believe what he was hearing. He had always been viewed as the family's underachiever. His only real accomplishment had been to maintain a wry grin, almost without interruption. For all of his 15 years, could he possibly be the wilder king? You, Percy, may not have much up here. Bayard tapped Percy's forehead with a gnarled forefinger. But here, he pointed at Percy's heart. Here, Percy, you will surpass your brothers. The old prophet's face softened into a smile. But you must learn not to mock and tease the aged wayfarer who comes to your door. Bayard turned to Errol. A perplexed expression clouded the old man's face. Errol, I do not see the wilder king among your sons. Errol's relief was obvious. His old friend seemed to be returning to his senses. Well, Bayard, now that we've settled that, let's sit down to a proper meal together, shall we? He nudged the goat aside and put his arm around Bayard. Bayard didn't seem quite satisfied. But Errol, do you have another son? Errol stopped and counted his sons, his lip moving slightly. But of course I have another son. How could I have forgotten? Aiden, my youngest, is tending sheep in the bottom pasture. I wish to see him. Certainly, of course. He'd be heartbroken if he missed Bayard the truth speaker. I shall send for him at once. The faraway look returned to Bayard's eyes, much to Errol's alarm. No, Bayard, he began. Hold on a minute. You've got the wrong idea. One of the brothers snickered. All four were trying not to laugh.